Hey everyone, how's it going? So, it's no secret that some of the gym leaders and Elite Four members in Red and Blue aren't the most challenging, but one who is consistently kind of a pushover is Bruno. And so I decided it would be fun to try and play an entire game with Bruno's team, but not just his team. I'm also going to end up with his moves, meaning I'm not going to use any TMs. All of Bruno's moves, except for Machamp's Fissure, are moves they learn via level up. So as soon as I learn one of Bruno's moves I can learn via level up, that's the move I'm going to use. And those movesets are awful. Let's just take a look at them for 1 second. We have 2 Onyx with Slam, an 80 base power move with 75% accuracy, excellent. Rage, which is 20 base power and you can never do anything else. And Rock Throw, a move that misses 35% of the time. The rest of his Pokemon aren't as bad. At least Hitmonchan gets Mega Punch, Hitmonlee gets High Jump Kick, and Machamp gets Submission. Even with the lack of type diversity, those movesets are horrible, and I thought it'd be fun to see how challenging it would be to try and play through the game as similar to Bruno as possible. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and get all of Bruno's Pokemon. Now, there was a real question, do I get them naturally throughout the game? But you can't get both Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee in one game. Or if I'm going to use Game Shark to get a Machop earlier than I should, maybe I'll just use Game Shark and get all of Bruno's team, and I decided to opt for that. That way, I am Bruno for the longest possible time. I have his exact same team of 2 Onyx, Hitmonchan, a Hitmonlee, and a Machop right now. And because most of those Pokemon don't evolve, they're actually pretty powerful in the early game, and Brock isn't much of an issue. I should mention before I get to the Brock battle that all I did was use a Game Shark and change the wild Pokemon to be what I needed them to be. Funny enough, you can see that sometimes the sprite visual data was messed up. Not sure why that is, but they ended up fine. Also, I caught them at whatever level I could find them. Most of the Pokemon don't have great catch rates, so when I caught one I was happy. But it does mean that I have a level 4 Hitmonlee. I leveled up Machop though, so I figured I would be okay. It still doesn't know Low Kick, so Brock was actually a little bit more of a challenge. Speaking of more of a challenge, you'll notice we're playing Yellow. Yellow is overall a lot more difficult than Red and Blue, although that's not a very high bar, but the gym leader teams are typically more difficult. Brock is a bit of an exception. Because you're supposed to start with Pikachu, both of Brock's Pokemon are 2 levels lower, and Geodude can't use Defense Curl, although that's actually more of a bad thing for us, because that means it will be able to attack every single turn. So the strategy I use, because I do have 5 Pokemon, is I let off with one of the Onyx. Onyx does no Screech, so I'll try and lower the Geodude's defenses. After I use all 3 Screech, I'll just start hitting with Tackle until Onyx faints, and then I'll switch in my Hitmonlee, which is pretty underleveled, but a single Double Kick is able to knock out the Onyx, and Hitmonlee gains a few levels, which is pretty nice. Now, Onyx is both easier and more difficult, depending on what you want it to do. It now has Bind in addition to Bide. You'll notice I'm using Meditate. I'm kind of anticipating a Bide, and so using Meditate serves the dual purpose of not taking back any damage, and of course, raising my attack. Once I've maxed out my attack, Double Kick does 1-hit KO or 2-hit KO, depending on how you look at it. The Onyx, and that is Brock. Like I said, because I'm using single-stage Pokemon, didn't anticipate him being too difficult, but good to know if I ever did do a Hitmonlee run, Brock would be pretty easy. And after I face Brock, I have to do things a little bit differently. With one Pokemon, you can get to a decent level by sticking to just about minimum battles. With 5 Pokemon, if you want any hope of beating the Elite Four, you're going to need to battle a bunch of trainers because they all need to level up. And there's another reason for this challenge this is important. I'm also limiting myself that none of my Pokemon can be at a higher level than Bruno's team in Red and Blue. So that means Machamp can be no higher than level 58, Onyx 53 or 56, etc. Although this seems like a long ways away, and it is, it explains why I'm not just using Hitmonlee, for example, which arguably is Bruno's best Pokemon, all the time, because if I do that, Hitmonlee will become overleveled, and the other Pokemon will be underleveled, making it harder to use them, and if I just kept using Hitmonlee the whole way, it would hit that level 55 cap, and then I wouldn't be able to use it for the Elite Four, which would be brutal. So it's not just about beating the game, but in order to think ahead to the Elite Four, I need to use all my Pokemon effectively and make sure that none of them get too over-leveled. That being said, there aren't really any difficult battles. I mean, I do have 5 Pokemon, so there's less probability of standard battles being more difficult. Misty, on the other hand, would be challenging, so I'm going to battle rival number 2, and the rival uses totally different Pokemon in Yellow version. In this game, he leads off with Spearow, and I'm going to use the same strategy as before, where I start with Onix and use Screech, but this time I'm only going to use a single Screech, and then I'm just going to try and use Tackle until my Onix faints. Spearow likes to use Growl, which is better than Sand Attack, but it does make this part take a lot longer than I would like. Once Onix 1 faints, I just switch into Onix 2, and I'm just going to use Tackle. Of course, Spearow is going to go for Growl periodically. You just have to remain patient. My Onix are also pretty under-leveled, so this is a good opportunity to get them some valuable experience points. Or at least for Onix number 2. But if you were thinking there isn't an annoying Pokemon like Pidgeotto with Sand Attack, meet Sandshrew with Sand Attack. It may be slower, but it has more defense and loves to use Sand Attack, so that's super fun. I'm going to use a couple Screech because I know how annoying it's going to be. I want every hit to do as much damage as possible. Onix has really bad attack, and Tackle's a weak move anyway, so I'm not doing very much damage, and eventually Sandshrew knocks out Onix number 2. I swap in Hitmonchan and go for Comet Punch. You'll notice I have Mega Punch, which is a TM move, and so I should clarify that I do allow TMs that are moves Bruno's Pokemon knows. There are a few examples of that, and Mega Punch is one. But here's where I make a mistake. I thought Comet Punch was 100% accuracy, not 85, which is the same as Mega Punch. So I should have just used Mega Punch. It does way more damage, and thus Sandshrew is able to attack me. It doesn't matter, I knock it out the next turn, but this is something I wouldn't find out till much later, so if you're wondering, why is he using Comet Punch? That's why. I forgot how the move worked. Now, one Pokemon both rivals do have in common is Rattata. I get a critical hit Mega Punch, which you can see how much damage that does. Still doesn't knock it out, and since the Rattata outspeeds me, it's easily able to knock me out with a Hyper Fang. I then send out Hitmonlee. Unfortunately, it both outspeeds and gets a critical hit, but Double Kick is able to knock it out. And now I'm just going to need to hit Eevee. That could be a problem because Eevee also knows Sand Attack. Thankfully, I outspeed. It doesn't knock it out. I do get hit with Sand Attack, but the second Double Kick hits as well, and there we go. Rival number 2 was not super challenging, but we wouldn't say easy. I mean, it pretty much was 1 for 1, and he's using pre-evolved Pokemon. But my Pokemon are at a much lower level, so honestly, this challenge is shaping up to be both very fair, but not overly challenging. I'm enjoying it so far. However, after I go to Bill's house, I try and battle Misty, and that went just about as well as you would think. Starmie both has outstanding special and is very fast, plus I have 2 rock ground Pokemon, so Misty made quick work of my entire team. It's also a bit of a problem that Hitmonlee, one of my best Pokemon, only knows fighting moves, which are resisted by Starmie's Psychic type. So I figured it makes more sense, even though it'll take a little bit more time, to go down to Vermilion City, fight all the trainers that I can in that area, and try Misty again later. Also out of curiosity, I battled Rival 3 pretty much right away, and I cannot begin to express how annoyed I was I couldn't use Body Slam. It would have helped, but nope, Bruno's Pokemon don't know Body Slam. Once again, I lead with Onix. Which Onix? It's hard to keep track. There's one with slightly higher HP, and one with slightly higher speed. I know Bruno's Onixes are identical, but I didn't feel like messing with their DVs. I just caught 2 Onix. Anyway, the strategy you can see is pretty simple. I use Tackle, Spearow uses a bunch of growls, I get frustrated, switch to Screech, use it 3 times, it hits twice, then I do way more damage and knock out the Spearow. Good job, Onix. Now, this time Rattata comes out second. I still have all those growls, so I use Screech twice, and you can see how much damage Rattata does. My Tackle's doing decent damage too, but I just simply don't have the HP, and down goes Onix number 1. Now, Hitmonchan is pretty underleveled, so I'm going to use it right here. I go for Agility because the Rattata is going to outspeed me. If it used Quick Attack, that may have been pretty bad. And once again, I go for Comet Punch thinking it has higher accuracy. I get a critical hit, which actually isn't lucky because it has 2 Screeches, but I knock it out anyway, so that works out. Now, the Sandshrew comes out. I go for Mega Punch. I'm doing like nothing. Also, I'm not going to survive much longer, but the Sandshrew stops attacking and uses Sand Attack. My accuracy is so low, and eventually I decide, you know what, Hitmonchan kinda needs experience. Let's switch to Onix number 2. This time I use 4 Screeches. One of them was a misclick. Unfortunately, at this level, Sandshrew has Slash, which is doing quite a bit of damage. I am able to get off one tackle after it uses a Sand Attack, but Onix isn't able to do very much. Thankfully, it is set up for the next Pokemon, Hitmonchan, who I again go for Comet Punch. Thankfully, it knocks it out, and we only have one Pokemon left, Eevee. Now, because at this point, the rival just attacks randomly, Eevee will use Growl, Sand Attack. It's not like Mega Punch was doing much damage anyway, but it took it many turns until it decided to use Tackle. Honestly, that works out in my favor more times than not. Would have loved Hitmonchan to knock out the Eevee for the experience, but it did good work. Now, after it faints, I think about going for Hitmonlee because it's at a lower level, and that would have been fine, but I was worried Misty wouldn't be possible until I evolved Machop to Machoke, which would take quite a bit of leveling up. Doesn't evolve to level 28, so I use it, and even with its best efforts using Sand Attack, I hit with Low Kick, and there's the battle. Again, not overly difficult, but not easy either. But if it's more difficult you want, let's talk about Misty. I lead off with Onix just to figure out if my Onix would outspeed Staryu. It does not, and a single water gun knocks it out. Now, I was hoping Machop would outspeed, it doesn't. You'll notice Karate Chop got a critical hit. There are 2 things to take note of. 1, Karate Chop has an increased critical hit ratio, which is important, and 2, it's a normal move in Generation 1. Both of which are going to help me out. I get the critical hit, and that's why I used it over Low Kick, even though it's the same type, and then another Karate Chop will knock out Staryu. Starmie I was pretty worried about. Of course, turn 1 it goes for Harden, but I get that critical hit, then it goes for Water Gun and it gets a critical hit. Pretty unlucky. I'm able to get another critical hit Karate Chop, which is double good because it ignores the Harden, but it uses Bubble Beam, and I'm pretty sure this battle is over. I swap into Hitmonchan because it has a normal attacking move, so it's going to be my best bet. Of course, Misty goes for next defend. I use Agility, and even with that, the Starmie outspeeds me. I am able to get off a single Mega Punch, which does next to nothing, before Hitmonchan is knocked out. And at this point, the battle is over. I just have a Hitmonlee with Double Kick, which is resisted. And all those X defense, there's no way, unless Misty literally decides to never use a water move for the rest of the battle. Huh. Well, what can you do? I mean, that's Generation 1. And listen, I think we can all fairly criticize some modern Pokemon games for being easy, but man, Gen 1 AI is just so bad sometimes. I've done plenty of runs that I haven't made yet in Generation 3, and it's just so much more difficult because the AI actually is somewhat competent. But I'll take it. Definitely a pretty challenging battle. You'll also notice I have a Paris. None of Bruno's Pokemon can learn Cut, so we still have a Pokemon for HM purposes. It cannot be used in battle though, of course. Paris would help. And since I'm feeling so good about that victory over Misty, let's go fight Lieutenant Surge, who in Yellow version has just one Raichu. It is at level 28 though, and knows some pretty decent attacks, so even though I have an Onix, it knows Mega Punch and Mega Kick. I'm only able to set up all my Screeches, which will help, but yeah, Onix is not an automatic victory, which would be the case in Red and Blue. I then swap in Hitmonchan, try to use Agility to try and outspeed the Raichu, goes for X Speed, just go for Mega Punch after being hit with Growl, doesn't do enough damage, and then Mega Kick one-hit KO. Hitmonchan needs to level up a little bit more. I then try Onix. Its attacking moves are so bad at this level I go for Bind, but because I'm not outspeeding, Bind isn't actually that cheap, and the Raichu is able to knock me out in just 3 hits, albeit it got a critical hit, but it has pretty fast speed, so that's not to be super unexpected. Finally, I say, okay, I'm ready to win now. Go for Machop and Low Kick. I don't want a critical hit because of all the Screeches. Thunderbolt would have been close to a one-hit KO, but uses Mega Kick, and there goes Lieutenant Surge. A lot more difficult than you would have thought, because in Yellow, most of the major trainers usually are a little bit more difficult. And after beating Lieutenant Surge, I recognize that my Pokemon are at too low a level, So it's time to battle any of the trainers I missed and a bunch of trainers in Rock Tunnel and in the greater Saffron Metro area, so to speak. And by the time I get to Giovanni, my Pokemon are at a much more reasonable level. But one of the trainers I fought to gain some experience was rival number 4. I didn't go through the rest of the tower, but I did fight him before Giovanni, which is something I never do. I lead with Onix versus his Fearow, and you'll see the amazing accuracy of Rock Throw. I do hit, and it does very little, so I start using Screech, and then Rock Throw decides I don't feel like hitting. Then I get a critical hit, which I don't think helped, but whatever. Finally, I knock out the Fearow. Now, this part of the battle was extremely boring and frankly kind of lucky. Onix has Bind, which I can't keep till the end, but I do have it for now. Bind has a chance to miss, but when it hits and you outspeed, the other Pokemon can never attack. Now, I do miss quite a few times, but Shelder's quote-unquote good AI tells it that Withdraw is a water move, so it should use that. It does also have Clamp, so I'm not sure how I never got one of those, but it did take a long time with all those withdraws. But eventually, Onix did knock out the Shelder. The rival now has a Vulpix, so I start spamming Rock Throw. It's going to take 3 hits, and of course I get hit with Ember and I get burned. Hooray. But I still knock out the Vulpix first, which is what I wanted. Now out comes Sandshrew, and I go for Bind at first, but I realize, well, that's not going to work. I'm going to faint with the burn first. So let's set up some Screeches and help out the next Pokemon. Takes a while for Onix to actually get knocked out, but eventually it happens. And here comes Hitmonchan. Let's go for Comet Punch with its better accuracy. And it doesn't knock out. The rival heals, starts spamming Sand Attack, and let's make a long story short. Hitmonchan would not knock out the Sandshrew. Whatever, I send out the second Onix, and because Sandshrew's defense has been lowered, Bind does more than enough damage, and down goes Sandshrew. One more Pokemon left, Eevee. Eevee doesn't have super high defenses, but it'll be much quicker if I go for a single Screech and then use Bind. I do so, and slowly but surely, Eevee is knocked out. There we go, rival number 4. Not a very dramatic battle, but definitely a very different team than what we're used to seeing. But after I battle some more trainers, I end up going through the Rocket Hideout and battling Giovanni. And the Giovanni fight itself is not very interesting. He has a Persian instead of a Kangaskhan, but otherwise the exact same team. I also led with Hitmonchan accidentally and then accidentally switched to Onix. I wasn't planning on making this a video. When I play to make a video, I play very deliberately so that the battles can be narrated easily. At this point, this was just something I was doing for fun, and then maybe I would make a video on Pokemon Stadium later on, but obviously things changed, and you'll see why. But the strategy is just use Hitmonlee and fighting moves, and you're good. And now that we have the Sylph Scope, it's time to go through Pokemon Tower. Nothing too interesting here. I get the Pokeflute, and now it's time to battle some more trainers, and let me explain something else that I'm doing. You see, on any team, every Pokemon should have a role. When you have 2 Onix that are going to have the same moveset, they're not going to have individual roles. But Hitmonchan is the only Pokemon with special attacks using Bruno's moveset. Hitmonchan has base 35 special attack, and we're actually going to need those moves, you'll see later. So what I've been doing is buying calciums. Now, you can buy up to 10 calciums before they stop working, and you can still gain more stat experience. That's just the most you can gain via vitamins. The way you gain stat XP is based off the base stats of Pokemon you knock out, and Erika's gym has grass Pokemon with very good base special. So I waited until I bought all 10 of the calciums, and finally at that point, I used Hitmonchan to get through Erika's gym to try and get as much special as possible. These are the types of considerations you have to make, because since I'm not allowed to pick my own moves or my own Pokemon, the one thing I can do a little differently than Bruno, aside from picking moves not at random, is to try and make my Pokemon the best versions of themselves. I didn't reset for DVs. I have no idea what my Pokemon DVs are. They could be terrible, which would be pretty on brand for Bruno, but I can at least make this the best this Hitmonchan that I could be. That was a nonsense statement. Anyway, finally I do face Erika, and even though she doesn't have a Victory Bell or a Vileplume, just a Weepinbell and Gloom, they're at slightly higher levels, but the real issue is that they're poison Pokemon, at least the second 2 are. I have mostly fighting moves, and 2 of my Pokemon are rock ground Pokemon, 4 times weak to grass moves, so Hitmonchan really does have to do quite a bit of work here. In saying that, I'm going to lead with Hitmonlee because Erika leads off with Tangela in yellow, and Tangela is a pure grass type. I'll use a Meditate and then spam Double Kick and hope that it doesn't use Mega Drain too often because, well, that's not optimal. She misses with Bind on turn 1, Mega Drain turn 2, but by that point, Tangela is knocked out. Not bad. Now at this point, I just use Double Kick and it does way more damage than I anticipated, but Weepinbell goes for Razor Leaf. It's not a guaranteed critical hit, but close to it. Down goes Hitmonlee. Now Hitmonchan comes out, 1 Mega Punch is all it needs. Pretty good, but we still have to face Gloom. Unfortunately, Mega Punch would be a 3-hit KO. I do hit both times, but Gloom goes for Petal Dance. Petal Dance is a 2-hit KO, but Gloom is so close to being knocked out. Thankfully, its speed is poor. Machoke, yes, it's finally a Machoke, now outspeeds, and there goes the battle. We have beaten half the game with Bruno's team, and we're not significantly over-leveled. It's something people bring up in solo runs. This is the first run you're going to see my Pokemon are pretty much under-leveled the whole time. But while all the gym leaders so far have been a little different, Koga is extremely different. He has 3 Venonat all in the mid to high 40s, which use Psychic moves, and then a Venomoth, which also knows Psychic moves. Now, I'm no Pokemon expert, but a fighting and rock team against Pokemon that are at a much higher level with Psychic moves doesn't sound like it's going to go well for me. So I have to go to Silph Company just to gain some more levels to make Koga even possible. And you can see a couple of the failed battles, by the way. I was able to get through the first 3 Venonat. I mean, Venonat aren't super powerful anyway, but the Venomoth, forget it. Being Bug Poison is also like the worst typing because it double resists fighting, which are my most powerful moves. Yes, I know I have Karate Chop, but this is just not going well. And so let's try something else. I'm going to go to Silph Company and try battling Rival number 5. No, this is not Rival Fivel. Rival Fivel is a very specific Rival number 5 from Red and Blue. This guy is different. I mean, first off, he leads with Sandslash, not a flying type Pokemon. And as you can see, Hitmonchan is leveled up significantly to the point where it knows Ice Punch, a move it actually does know with Bruno, and I get a freeze first turn. Definitely lucky, but not a game changer. Unfortunately, with my current special, it's a 3-hit KO, but since it's frozen, there's really nothing Sandslash could do. Now, for Ninetales, I just used Mega Punch a couple times. It went for Roar and Ember. Didn't want to burn, didn't get one. So Hitmonchan is doing some pretty good work. Now, for Cloyster, unfortunately, I don't know Thunder Punch yet, which Bruno's Hitmonchan does know. And Cloyster has really good defense, so I'm going to go for Fire Punch. It's not doing very much damage. Eventually, I actually get a burn, but by that point, Hitmonchan has very little HP and Aurora Beam knocks it out, but it put in some really good work in this battle. I decide it's Hitmonlee's turn to get in on the fun, use Double Kick, and bye-bye Cloyster. Now here comes the closest Rival number 5 comes to being Rival Fivel. He does have a Kadabra, but not an Alakazam. You can see just how much damage Rolling Kick, which can flinch, does on Kadabra. Doesn't knock it out. Maybe Jump Kick would have been better, but Psybeam does knock out Hitmonlee. None of the fighting Pokemon have very good special. Even Onix, the rock Pokemon, isn't faster than Kadabra, but it survives Confusion and is able to use Slam, and that leaves us with 1 Pokemon left, Jolteon, and Jolteon does know Double Kick, so that's about it for Onix. I then send out Machoke, but even though Low Kick is doing somewhat decent damage, Jolteon alternates between Thunder Shock and Sand Attack, so I'm not able to get off enough Low Kicks, and eventually Jolteon gets a critical hit due to its amazing speed, and we have just 1 Onix left. Now, I know how poor Onix's attack is, so I go for Rock Throw. It hits, but you can see how little damage it did. Jolteon only survives on a little bit of health, but Onix is not going to hang on for that much longer. I go for Slam since it has slightly better accuracy, and I thankfully knock out the Jolteon. So, Rival number 5 is definitely a lot better than Rival Fivel, especially with my terrible Bruno team. But thanks to the power of teamwork, I was able to defeat him. Before Koga, that almost never happens, but something that is quite common in these runs is how this battle with Giovanni went. He's very, very easy, unsurprisingly. I have a Machoke that is poisoned in at like no health. He still leads with Nidorino, and Machoke, without getting a single critical hit, is still able to knock out the Nidorino. Man, Giovanni is almost as bad as Bruno. Then comes out the Persian, it outspeeds and goes for Payday, so bye Machoke. Hitmonlee, however, is easily able to withstand a Payday, and a single hit of Double Kick, with a critical hit albeit, is enough to knock out Persian. Rhyhorn briefly appears and is promptly hit by a Jump Kick, and then disappears, and now we have Nidoqueen, so almost the same team as in Red and Blue. I know Hitmonlee is not going to do that much damage, so I'm just kind of curious how much each of my attacks will do. Not very much is the answer, and Nidoqueen is easily able to take it out with a Body Slam. Then I send out Hitmonchan, and of course I get a freeze on the first turn. Ice Punch is now doing about a quarter. Considering Nidoqueen's decent special, I'm actually kind of happy with that. Once again, while the freeze is lucky, it was not crucial, but good for Hitmonchan to get those experience points and stat experience. And we've beaten Giovanni. And usually you'd expect me to now go battle Koga, but in order to further increase my special, I'm gonna go to Saffron Gym and battle the trainers there. And since I'm already there, might as well try to battle Sabrina. She's not gonna be easy, but she has a very different team. 3 Pokemon, level 50 Abra, Kadabra, and Alakazam, and only the Alakazam really likes to attack. So maybe it's possible? Let's see. We begin by having the ultimate staring contest of moves that don't hit. Flash with 75% accuracy and Mega Punch with 85% accuracy. Of course, once a couple flashes hit, that accuracy goes down, but eventually I win this battle of wits. And yeah, that was super difficult. By the way, Abra knows all of 2 moves, Teleport and Flash. Why is this even a thing? I have no idea. Now, Kadabra actually does know Psychic, but decides to use Recover and Kinesis. Eventually, after missing with Mega Punch 3 times, I realize, hey, Hitmonchan's pretty decent. Why not switch to something else? That might be smart. Of course, Sabrina uses that opportunity to use an X-Defend. I do hit with Slam with the Onix, but Kadabra finally decides it's time to attack. Not just with Psy-Wave, but with Psy-Kick, and yeah, so long, Onix. You may have noticed I also evolved Machoke to Machamp. Typically, these are solo game runs, but because Bruno has a Machamp, so I decided it was time that I got one. Didn't really make much of a difference in this battle. So let's go back to the Pokemon that was actually doing damage, Hitmonchan. I hit with a Mega Punch, and thankfully, Kadabra decides using Psychic would just be super lame, and I'm able to get a critical hit and knock it out. So I've made it to the Alakazam. Better than I thought I would do, I'm gonna be honest. Now, I know Alakazam will outspeed, so I go for Mega Punch anyway. Of course, Alakazam goes for Reflect. I do hit, but I'm doing nothing. For good measure, it goes for next defend. Thankfully, I picked Thunder Punch, hoping for the fluky paralysis. Do not get one. Alakazam uses Psychic, and I only have 1 Pokemon left. Okay, I know I had 2, but you knew Onix wasn't going to be much help, so now I only have 1 Pokemon for real left. It only knows fighting moves, and with all those defense boosts, oh, that was helpful. And Alakazam decides not to attack. Okay, I won! Yeah, so remember how I said in those past battles, a little lucky, but it didn't make a difference? Made a big difference. Definitely didn't expect to beat Sabrina before I beat Koga, especially considering it was the psychic moves that were giving me such a problem. So if I could beat Sabrina, Koga should be a breeze, right? Well, I'm gonna lead with Hitmonchan and go for Fire Punch. It's doing over half, which is good, and Psychic's doing just around half, which is also good. So I knock out the first Venonat. Thankfully, Venonat number 2 uses Psybeam as opposed to Psychic, so I'm able to survive, and once again, 2 Fire Punches knock out the second Venonat. Venonat number 3 does use Psychic and knocks me out, but not before I get off a third and final Fire Punch. Hitmonchan is really shaping up to be the MVP of the middle game right here. Now, I do know that Onix will outspeed Venonat, would have loved to have hit with that Rock Throw, but of course, I miss and get hit with Sleep Powder. Psychic is not a one-hit KO. Venonat actually has really poor special. It's Venomoth, which gets good special. Doesn't matter, Onix never wakes up, and is knocked out by a second Psychic. Now, Onyx number 2 does actually hit with Rock Throw, but it doesn't even do half damage. The Venonat survives. Thankfully, it uses an X attack, and I go for Slam and knock it out. And that leaves Venomoth. Venomoth does outspeed, but it goes for a Leech Life. What a bad attack. I go for Rock Throw, and I miss, of course. Then it goes for an X attack, and I hit with Rock Throw, a critical hit. But yeah, that's doing nothing. Psychic. Goodbye, Onyx number 2. Now here's where Machamp will be helpful because it's faster, so it should critical hit almost every time with Karate Chop. I also survive the Psychic, get the critical hit, but it does not knock it out. Thankfully, Koga decides to use an X attack inexplicably. And yeah, if that doesn't scream guy who replaces Bruno as number 2 of the Elite Four, I don't know what else does. I mean, what fantastic battling from both sides. Just a truly remarkable Pokemon battle. VGC 2014 ain't got nothing on J-Rose 11's Bruno playthrough of Bruno versus Koga. A masterpiece, truly. And the truth is, after Koga, the game doesn't get all that much easier, if I'm going to be honest. There are a lot more trainers, meaning I get to level up a bunch, but Blaine is quite a bit more difficult than he was in Red and Blue. And the biggest reason is that rather than leading off with a Growlithe and then following with a Ponyta, both of which are really easy to set up on, Blaine instead has a Ninetales. And so I'm gonna try and use Onyx to win the Rock Throw lottery. Ninetales doesn't make it easy. Flamethrower pretty much knocks me out. It knows Confuse Ray, and all the while I'm using a move that misses 35% of the time. Shockingly, I'm actually able to get off enough Rock Throws to knock out the Ninetales with one Onyx. It kind of helps that it used Tail Whip, which not only isn't an attack, but activates the, say it with me, Badge Boost glitch, and Rapidash wasn't too impressed, used Fire Spin by Onyx number 1. I send out Onyx number 2 and try and win the Rock Throw lottery again. The Rapidash alternates between using Fire Spin, which is the worst move it could use because I literally can't attack, Takedown, which is pretty good, and Growl, which is not my favorite. I do get off quite a few Rock Throws, but not enough to knock out the Rapidash. Thankfully, my Hitmonlee is pretty speedy, uses Jump Kick, and knocks out the Rapidash. So there's one Pokemon left, but it's the scariest, Arcanine. Fire Blast is a one-hit KO, but it uses Takedown. Jump Kick is doing roughly about a third. It does use Fire Blast, but I get a lucky miss, and there we go. We have beaten Blaine. I did have 2 Pokemon left, so I think I would have been successful regardless, but Arcanine with Fire Blast is quite devastating to my team with very low special, and the next gym leader is one that on paper is going to be a heck of a lot easier in Giovanni. Now, I lead with Onyx because I need the experience points, and I know it's not going to work, but Onyx is not going to do very well in this battle regardless. I do end up hitting it with a single slam, which does next to nothing, and Dugtrio responds with Dig, so that went just about as well as you could have expected. Now, I didn't think Hitmonlee would outspeed, but I knew a Jump Kick would be enough to knock out Dugtrio, and of course, it uses Sand Attack, so I miss with Jump Kick, which deals 1 damage when it crashes. Eventually, I do hit it with a Jump Kick, and so I've evened up the score. Next comes Persian, and even though Hitmonlee is a good matchup, I have those accuracy drops. I'm going to switch into Onyx because when you switch, all the stat drops go away. Now, this actually was pretty hilarious. So Onyx, I'm going to use Slam, and ideally Persian uses Fury Swipes because they'll often do way less damage than Slash, which will always critical hit. But Fury Swipes kept doing 5 hits, which is the maximum and very unlikely. And when it wasn't using Fury Swipes, it was using Double Team and raising its evasion. It did use a Slash in there, but thankfully, I was able to hit it with enough slams to knock it out. I did not think there was a chance in the world Onyx would knock out this Persian, but I'm not complaining. However, that victory was pretty short-lived for Onyx. It does hit Slam on Nidoqueen, but then it uses Earthquake, so yeah, bye Onyx. But good job knocking out Persian. Now, I actually make a mistake here. I wanted to switch into Hitmonchan and use Ice Punch. Unfortunately, I switched into Hitmonlee. The names are a little similar. Then I'm like, oh no, what do I do? oh, I'll just swap into Spearow, but that's not allowed. It's only there for HM purposes so that I can fly from location to location quickly. So I have to swap into Machamp. Thankfully, Machamp is a total champ, survives a Thunder and an Earthquake, gets critical hits with Karate Chop. Boy, I'm gonna miss it because after this battle it's being replaced with Fissure, which is pretty useless. And Machamp does its job and knocks out the Nidoqueen. Of course, just like last time, we have a stronger Pokemon, Nidoking, coming out and using Earthquake, and this time even outspeeding, so I don't do any damage. But I can use Hitmonchan, and truth is, Hitmonchan shouldn't have stood much of a chance. Nidoking was outspeeding, and without that critical hit, Ice Punch was doing next to nothing. Thankfully, it used Double Kick and then Leer, activating the Badge Boost glitch, allowing my Hitmonchan to outspeed and do slightly more damage to the Nidoking. And thanks to Nidoking's refusal of using Earthquake, I'm able to knock it out with Hitmonchan, albeit again at very low health. And if you're expecting Rhydon to knock it out with Earthquake, doesn't happen. In the third of my 8 gym battles, Ice Punch will freeze a Pokemon. Crazy good luck considering 2 of these were on my first attempt. But hey, I'm not going to complain, and once again, let's face it, Hitmonlee would have easily knocked out Rhydon. Regardless, it's good for Hitmonchan to get that experience, and after its poor effort against Blaine, it was a good showing, a great showing. Good job, Hitmonchan, I'm proud of you. But, if you've watched my solo runs before, you know that, just like in sports, this is the regular season. It's basically a glorified warm-up. We're now preparing for the playoffs, but we have a big game ahead of us against rival number 6. Just like last battle, he leads with Sandslash and I counter with Hitmonchan. Ice Punch is now doing around half, but it's hard to know if it would have been a 2-hit KO since I get a critical hit, and I don't get hit with Slash, so not complaining, but probably the best possible outcome right here. Then comes out Execute, which is once again the same as in Red and Blue. Thankfully, Ice Punch is still doing half, and Execute goes for Solar Beam, so I have 2 turns to attack it and knock it out without taking any damage. And because Hitmonchan is at such high health, I swap into Onix because I want to save it for later, and Onix is a better matchup. Now, I go for Bind initially, and you'll see why, because after I use Bind just once, I try and win the Rock Throw lottery, and I lose big time. Only 1 Rock Throw manages to land before the Ninetales knocks me out, so yeah, Rock Throw sucks. Now, I send out Onix number 2, and I accidentally use Slam, but it gets a critical hit. I do end up hitting Rock Throw shortly thereafter, so although it took 2 Onix, I do finally knock out the Ninetales. And here's the Pokemon I was saving Hitmonchan for. I go for Rock Throw, knowing it will 1-hit KO me with pretty much any move, and it's time to swap into Hitmonchan and go for Thunder Punch. It does a bit over a third, so it's going to be a 3-hit KO. I get hit with Aurora Beam, and I'm not able to get off all 3 Thunder Punches, but I do take the Cloyster down to very low health. Enough that Hitmonlee, I was thinking about Machamp, but Hitmonlee will outspeed and knock it out with a Jump Kick easily. Now, we've seen this matchup before, and thankfully Hitmonlee outspeeds. I go for Jump Kick, and I don't want to see Psychic, I see Reflect. Perfect, a second Jump Kick will knock out the Kadabra, and I have Hitmonlee for Jolteon, which is pretty useful. Or so I thought, because welcome to Generation 1. Jolteon knows a Psychic move, Agility, which doesn't do any damage. But the quote-unquote good AI tells the rival, hey, you have a Psychic move. Use the Psychic move. Good job! And of course, that means even though I miss, I'm able to knock it out without any risk of Jolteon actually doing damage. A pretty anticlimactic end to otherwise kind of a tense battle, but this is nothing compared to the Elite Four. I'm not going to go and hype it up too much because this is why, I mean, the run was interesting up to this point, but the Elite Four was insane. Because being underleveled for most of these trainers, they don't have great movesets, some of them act really silly, you can win. But the Elite Four is pretty smart, have much better movesets, and then we have to deal with Agatha, which is one of the worst battles I think I've ever done. And I've beaten 4 games with a Magikarp. But we still have Lorelei and our yellow counterpart to deal with, so let's talk about them. Lorelei really isn't too bad, especially because I've leveled up significantly since you've seen my team last. Additionally, there are 2 strategies that work, a main strategy and a backup. I got the main strategy, which is a lot luckier to work in this battle. To start, knock out Dugong with a single attack, usually high jump kick, but I misclicked, didn't matter, got the crit. 2 on the Cloister. Slowbro is not guaranteed to use Psychic, and if it doesn't, 3 Mega Kicks are enough to take out Slowbro, but Mega Kick does not have great accuracy, and Slowbro can always use Psychic. If it does, you'll have to switch to Hitmonchan and then do the rest of the battle with it and Machamp. Thankfully, we didn't have that happen. Hitmonlee does outspeed the Jinx, so I'm able to knock it out with a single high jump kick. Lapras will typically be a 2-hit KO unless you get a critical hit. There is a 1 in 16 chance high jump kick will 1-hit KO, and of course, that's what I got. Not necessary, but because of that, we're able to beat Lorelei with just Hitmonlee. But now, we get to face our counterpart from Yellow version. The version of us who actually uses moves like Earthquake and Rock Slide, you know, moves that actually make Onix usable. But unfortunately, he is still Bruno, even if he's a better Bruno. And even though I'm using Bruno's team, I am still not actually Bruno, and thus know how to use my team a little more effectively. I lead with Hitmonchan and go for Ice Punch. It is typically a 2-hit KO, but I do get a critical hit, so that's kind of fortuitous. But luck giveth and luck taketh away. After hitting Hitmonchan with Mega Punch, I get hit by Fire Punch and I get burned, so I have to switch to my less good but more accurate special punches. I opt for Thunder Punch for no real reason. Hitmonchan tries its best to evade me, but does not do so. However, I am still burned, and Hitmonlee is typically a 2-hit KO with Mega Punch. I have to still use Thunder Punch. It's looking to be about a 3-hit KO, but Bruno decides to use an X Defend, good old Bruno. And then for good measure, I get a critical hit, so luck is on my side once again. Hitmonchan is doing some pretty good work, and considering the second Onix, I'm just going to use Ice Punch again. The burn didn't end up being as big of an issue as it could have been. This time it was a 2-hit KO, but once again Bruno uses an X Defend. And down goes Onix. One more Pokemon left. Level 58 Machamp. This time Thunder Punch is doing next to nothing. Machamp goes for Leer, but finally Bruno decides, alright, time to attack, goes for Submission. Hitmonchan, great job. 4 Pokemon knocked out. Awesome. Now it's time to one-up Bruno by sending out my Machamp. Unfortunately, Submission misses, and he goes for X Defend. I hit with Submission, but because of that X Defend, I do not knock it out. He goes for Submission, but the recoil doesn't knock him out. I miss again with Submission, and he gets a critical hit Karate Chop. I wish I could learn Karate Chop, but no, Red and Bruno doesn't have Karate Chop. But it's all good. Submission does hit, and Red and Bruno has beaten Yellow Bruno. Take that. But honestly, the time for celebration is over. You guys might know if you've watched my videos, I don't like to save between Elite Four members. But I'm going to tell you right now, we're not doing that. Agatha is a nightmare. And let's talk about how much of a nightmare she is while I show you lots of footage of me losing. I'll show you the successful battle, but it required a very specific set of circumstances to occur. Let's first talk about what the issue is. Unlike Red and Blue, Agatha is not nearly as inherently trolly. Her first Gengar used to know Hypnosis, Confuse Ray, Nightshade, and Dream Eater. Now the only move it has in common is Confuse Ray, still annoying, but it also has Substitute, Mega Drain, and Lick. Ordinarily, this would make it a far less annoying Pokemon to set up against. However, with my team, it's nearly impossible. Because, think about the moves I have to hit Ghost Pokemon. Machamp has Fissure, which does not affect Pokemon that are faster. Every one of Agatha's Ghost Pokemon are faster. Hitmonlee only knows fighting moves, so it's out of the question. So that leaves Machop and Onix. Onix knows Rock Throw, which we've discussed how bad it is. And Hitmonchan does know special moves, but Gengar and Haunter have incredibly high special, which is also a defensive stat in this generation. So I'm going to do next to no damage. So how the heck am I expected to win? This is how. The strategy for Agatha is to use Ice Punch and hope you get a freeze, either on Gengar or on Golbat if she swaps to it. That's not all though, and it's not as unlikely as you'd think. Because I do such low damage, I'm usually able to get at least 7 or 8 ice punches off. If she uses substitute, it's very annoying because you cannot freeze through a substitute. But when she decides to use lick or confuse ray and I don't get confused, I can use a bunch of ice punches, and usually 1 in every 3 battles with Agatha, I would manage to get a freeze. That's not the end of it though. I don't have nearly enough power points to freeze all her ghost Pokemon. So instead what I'm going to do is switch to one of my Onix. I only really need one of them for this, and I just didn't feel like wasting the time and training up a second, but it would have helped. The strategy is to use Harden. Onix knows Harden because Bruno's Pokemon only know moves they learn via level up. Onix learns Harden, and ordinarily that would be useless, but thanks to the badge boost glitch, whereby every time your stats are modified, all your stats are increased by an additional 12.5% because Gen 1. So my attack and speed are going up, meaning Onix will eventually be able to outspeed and do decent enough damage to Gengar when Rock Throw decides to hit. When you knock out the first Gengar, however, typically you'll make it all the way to the last Gengar, and that's when the run is over. Typically, the Arbok will use Glare because it's a 2-hit KO, and then you'll be outsped. It likes to use Psychic. Down goes the first Onix. The second Onix doesn't have the Harden set up, so it's not faster, doesn't have increased special, and doesn't have increased attack, so it's usually useless, and I have to rely on Hitmonchan getting a fluky freeze or paralysis. It never happened. Once Hitmonchan faints, you literally cannot win the battle, and then you reset, hoping for another opportunity. I think I battled Agatha close to 30 times. I won twice. Why twice? Because I didn't want to save after Agatha. I mean, let's not break my rule again, right? No, silly J-Rose. Once you beat Agatha, make sure you save. So this was the final Agatha battle, and like always, it did not go according to plan. You'll notice Lick missed on the first turn. That's a 1 in 256 chance. It's called a Generation 1 miss. Again, very well programmed game. Now, I don't end up getting the freeze, but Agatha doesn't use substitute. At least not often. When she does, it takes 3 regular hits to knock out the substitute, which is awful. But then a weird thing happens. Everything just starts going right. She doesn't use Mega Drain, which gains back some HP. She goes for Lick and doesn't get a paralysis. And oh yeah, even though I'm confused, I never really hit myself in confusion. And so, for the first time ever, I knock out the Gengar without freezing it with a Hitmonchan at very decent health. That's unexpected, to say the least. Next comes out Golbat, and I do not get the freeze with Ice Punch. I do get a Toxic Miss, and then after a Thunder Punch, I get Leech Life. I use Thunder Punch because I do want to save my Ice Punches to try and get a freeze later, and I've knocked out the Golbat with pretty full health. Again, this has never happened before and is not the strategy, but I am okay with it. But here's where something bizarre happened. I did have a rare candy left over, and I used it before this battle on Hitmonchan. That caused me to outspeed the Haunter, and because Gen 1, the switch happens after I hit it with Ice Punch, it doesn't freeze, but I wouldn't mind having Hitmonchan deal with Arbok. Mega Punch does not quite do half, but Arbok switches back into Haunter. Here's where the battle takes a bit of a bad turn. I get confused and put to sleep, and this Haunter knows Dream Eater. Thankfully, Haunter does not use it before I am able to wake up, sticking to Lick, which cannot paralyze because I'm already asleep. I'm still confused, and eventually I will get paralyzed with a Lick, but slowly but surely I am taking down this Haunter's health. Eventually Haunter swaps back into Arbok. Of course it goes for Wrap. I was thinking of switching and accidentally hit the item menu instead of the Pokemon menu. Decided not to, and thank goodness I did, because I go for Mega Punch and oh god, I'm fully paralyzed. But Arbok decides attacking his Super Lane, I get off a Mega Punch, and it survives on like a sliver of health, uses a Super Potion, and that is the last time Hitmonchan would attack. Did amazing work, but I would have loved it to knock out the Arbok. And if you're ready for some bad luck, Hitmonlee misses with a few Mega Kicks, and Arbok decides attacking would be great now. So I'm about to lose. Finally, I decide to swap into High Jump Kick, and I miss again, but luckily I hit with High Jump Kick, and it does do enough damage. I wasn't sure that it would to knock out the Arbok. It's not a great situation because Hitmonlee still can't attack Haunter, but this is still going way better than 99% of my other battles. I just go for high jump kick. It only is dealing 1 damage. I actually wish it dealt more back when you missed because I could just knock myself out. And Agatha switches to Gengar, which is kind of good because Haunter could have put me to sleep and gained back some HP with Dream Eater, which would have been pretty bad. Gengar I don't mind if it does just that because it's at full health. It also knows Psychic, which it uses, and now it is 2 Onix and a Machamp against Gengar and a Haunter. And here's where this battle just gets unbelievably crazy. Onix does end up getting confused, but you see the critical hit, second consecutive Rock Throw, and then the next time Rock Throw hits, another critical hit. That is crazy luck. I don't even want to guess at the percent chance of that turn of events, but I will take it. We only have a Haunter on a very small amount of health. Please just hit with Rock Throw. Oh, of course I'm paralyzed. Of course I'm fully paralyzed. Come on, Rock Throw. Thank goodness. If I wasn't using my Retron 5 with its 4 times speed, that would have been 2 hours of battle time against Agatha. That is one of the most difficult and annoying battles for all the wrong reasons. And yeah, I got lucky, but it's not like I had a choice in the Pokemon I was using or my movesets. And if I had any thoughts of ever trying this in Pokemon Stadium, which is what I initially wanted to do, yeah, right. We still have Lance and the Champion, 2 of the traditionally most difficult battles in the entire game. And while they're not as unfair as Agatha due to these restrictions, they're still very difficult. The truth is, Lance would have been a little easier if I'd leveled up a little more, because here's what I do. I lead with Hitmonchan and I go for Thunder Punch. It can be a 2-hit KO. This battle was a 3-hit KO, but Gyarados thought Leer was a super great move to use. That helps me out a little bit. But even though I have Ice Punch, I do not feel like facing Dragonair. They are way better in yellow version. As you see when I switch to Machamp and am hit with a Thunderbolt. I go for submission and it's doing the worst amount of damage. Enough that Lance uses his Hyper Potion, but not enough to knock it out. I decide to chance it and go for the 30% fissure. It doesn't work and I get hit with Thunder Wave. I go for submission and I'm rewarded for my boldness with the critical hit. But we still have another Dragonair to deal with. Hitmonlee will be responsible for that one. It also does that bad amount of damage, gets hit with Ice Beam, but thankfully Lance doesn't heal, and we are down to just 2 more Pokemon, one being Aerodactyl, which knows Fly now. Yay, yellow. I know Fly is going to 1-hit KO, I don't want to swap out, so I just allow Hitmonlee to faint. Now I send out leveled up Onix, and I'm going to use Harden. Thankfully Aerodactyl does not know Supersonic, it's probably going to go for Fly or Hyper Beam, both of which are perfectly acceptable since they won't do that much damage. Harden is both raising my defense and the rest of my stats. Thank you, Badge Boost Glitch. Another reason Pokemon Stadium would be very difficult, it isn't in those games since there are no badge boosts. After I set up 5 Hardens, Aerodactyl goes for Hyper Beam. I have a free attack, so I go for Rock Throw, I miss. I then use the 6th Harden, go for Rock Throw, and thankfully it doesn't take me too long to knock out Aerodactyl. The question is, will I be able to hit Dragonite with the Rock Throw? Yes, but I get a critical hit, which does slightly less damage than 6 badge boosts. It knows Blizzard, which is 90% accuracy in Generation 1, and easily knocks out Onix. Now my only hope is Hitmonchan to outspeed and to hit with Ice Punch. In spite of the 8-level gap, Hitmonchan does in fact outspeed, knocks out Dragonite, and Bruno has effectively made it to the final battle against the champion. Wow, this was way more difficult than I thought it would be. Thankfully, this is not the first battle with the rival. I do know what to expect, so I have a pretty good idea of what I need to do in order to win. I lead with Hitmonchan and go for Ice Punch. You've seen this before. And I get a massive critical hit, which is huge because Sandslash goes for Slash and gets a critical hit, which was frankly kind of likely, and does just about the same amount of damage as a regular Earthquake. I outspeed though, go for another Ice Punch, and there goes Sandslash. Now, Alakazam likes to start with Kinesis. I thankfully am able to hit with Mega Punch. Great job, Hitmonchan. Unfortunately, that is the last Mega Punch that Hitmonchan would use. I get hit with Psychic, but great work by Hitmonchan. It was clutch this entire run. Time for some of my other Pokemon to pick up the slack. Now, Machamp will survive a Psychic unless it crits. Yikes. Not really what I wanted to see, because I know Hitmonlee won't outspeed, and it's near its maximum level of level 55. Thankfully, Alakazam decides to go for Kinesis, and that makes up for that bad Psychic critical hit. It misses, Jump Kick knocks it out. Okay, we're back on track. Unfortunately, I ran out of PowerPoint restoring items like elixirs, so I have to use High Jump Kick instead of Mega Kick. It does have better accuracy, much better than Hypnosis that misses a few times. It is a Psychic move, so Exeggutor will keep going for it. Eventually, it does hit, but I've done some significant damage. Exeggutor then goes for Leech Seed, but I wake up very quickly. Leech Seed is very bad with sleep because I don't want this thing to restore health. Another High Jump Kick is not quite enough to take it out, but a Hypnosis miss plus High Jump Kick and Hitmonlee. Wow, it is picking up that slack. And in case you needed an exclamation point, critical hit on the Cloyster with the super effective. Has massive defense, so it definitely would not have been a one-hit KO otherwise, but I will take it. Now, I don't like having a Leech Seed on me, so I'm going to swap into Onix to get rid of it. It's also a decent matchup against Ninetales. It goes for Confuse Ray. I don't like that either, so I swap back into Hitmonlee, and thankfully it uses Quick Attack. High Jump Kick is doing roughly half of its health. It uses Tail Whip and misses with a Quick Attack. 1 in 256 chance of that happening. And we're down to the final Pokemon, Jolteon. It goes for the Thunder Wave, which wasn't necessary because I didn't outspeed it. High Jump Kick does about 3/4, but then it goes for Thunder, which does hit. And now I'm down to my final 2 Pokemon, the 2 Onix. Now, Jolteon does not have Double Kick anymore. It only has 1 attacking move that can affect Onix, Pin Missile. And you can see how little it's doing, so I'm going to set up 6 Hardens because I know how unlikely it is that I actually land one of my attacks. And when I do, I want this Jolteon to faint. After 6 Hardens, I go for Slam. It hits, and there goes the battle. Bruno from Red and Blue has defeated Pokemon Yellow with his terrible team, his terrible move pool, and what I'd like to think is a semi-competent player actually calling the shots. But that's about it for this video. I didn't even expect to make a video out of this, let alone one that lasted nearly an hour. So if you like these sort of more fun trainer-type challenges, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you guys with another solo run video in a couple days. Take care.